Troglodyte warning. Last week I did a video talking about why the UK is dying and why we're not allowed to talk about it. And there's a lot of discourse about why the UK is dying. People are leaving in droves. People are sick and tired of the status quo. And they're turning to figures like Nigel Farage, who's promising them if we reduce immigration to net, life will get better. You'll have more money, there'll be less people, and things will just kind of almost naturally get better. Like with a smaller population that aren't, a certain way, things will get better, which simply isn't true. So today I want to talk about the biggest threat facing the UK, and that's economic inequality. And I want to talk about a book that came out in 2019, and it's called The Inner Level. And it was a sequel to another book called The Spirit Level from 2009, written by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett. And these are two of the most important books, I think, ever written in sociology. They're two epidemiologists, and their latest book, The Inner Level, talks about the relationship between economic inequality, stress, mental health, and broader health conditions in the UK. And in the UK, we've seen in the last 15 years, people are more depressed than ever, more obesity levels, strokes are increasing in people in their 40s and 50s. And this is an illness that's associated with older people in their 70s and 80s, and a whole slew of health conditions. And they outline the data, which is compelling, that so much of the social ills we face, from alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, obesity, diabetes, strokes in younger people, mental health conditions, infant mortality, and so many others, crime, violent crime, are correlated to an unequal society in terms of what people own and the disparity between wealth from people at the bottom and people at the top. And we've seen since COVID that the people at the top have doubled their wealth and the people at the bottom haven't got anything more. Often, actually, since 2010, people's wages in real terms have either gone down or stagnated. And then you have inflation, the cost of living. So people are worse off now than they were before 2010 economically. That's why. And that gap keeps widening. Every year it gets wider. The salary of the average CEO compared to the worker is between 300 and 400 times. And often the studies suggest that there's not even evidence to suggest that those type of figures are justified in terms of the work they actually bring, the value they bring to the company, the labor, the work. Often is not justified because you have to justify it 400 times, don't you? And there's no evidence often that they are bringing that value. And again, that disparity is so harmful to society because, again, distrust, massive distrust in institutions, interpersonally, and people keep to themselves now. We are social animals, and this is leading to a lot of depression. And depression is the leading cause of disability in the UK and often across the world. We don't talk about it enough. And we see it as this inherent thing. People have depression. No, there's a reason why levels of depression over the last 30 years have kind of gone up increasingly. And that's due to a lot of neoliberal economics, the privatization of public assets and our lives in many ways. Everything is commodified. Everything is seen as, oh, we can make profit on that. And when you kind of see life like that, you take away the human element and everything's just, oh, well, we can make a business, we can make money from that. And it doesn't matter what the human consequences are. And we've seen this with social media recently. Mark Zuckerberg is making billions from Facebook, but at what cost to democracy, people's mental health, social cohesion? We're more polarized than ever. And this is no accident. And there's actually evidence in the inner level that outlines the correlation between economic inequality and the kind of polarization and distrust that has been exacerbated by social media. So that's why we are so divided and so kind of polarized. People are pushing either further to the right or further to the left. And you've got that massive division between where people are. And their solution is we need radical democracy. We need to change the economic system, embracing worker co ops, who often are more reliable. People have more of a stake if they own or own a part of their workplace. They're willing to go the extra mile. They're more stable to economic shocks. And there's so much, a whole slew of data that actually says economic worker co-ops are good for the economy, small businesses that are owned by the people who work there and create value to communities. Whereas if an Amazon comes in to the town or Coca-Cola or some corporate, they kind of come in, pay the least they can get away with, and kind of not really add to the community. Whereas worker co-ops actually add to the community because when you own something, again, a lot of depression comes back to the notion that workers don't have control over their workplace. And there's plenty of studies that go into this, like ownership and meaning in life are key. And if people spend 80% of their lives in work, and they feel like they don't really have control over what they're doing day to day. It causes, it really does impact on people's mental health, their well being, their meaning, and it is dehumanizing. It's a dehumanizing thing to feel like you're not really human. You're just a cog in the machine, and what you say, your opinion, doesn't have any value in the workplace. And we need to shift democracy into the workplace and challenge the notion that actually we value democracy in society broader. We live in democracies, but not for the workplace. And that's the next step in humanity. The next development is actually giving workers a voice, real meaningful votes, and say in how a business or their workplace operates. And that will improve both people's well being, the economy, because again, our economy is stagnant because there is an investment in people. There is an investment in actually moving forward. Like it's just short term profit. That's all that matters. At the detriment of the environment, people's well being, and any future vision of how people will actually live. All profit. All profit. So I really highly recommend The Inner Level. It's a great book. It goes into so much detail and evidence about the harms of inequality and just how so many social ills are deeply correlated and caused by our just imbalance in us, the vast majority having little and a tiny minority just having the rest. And we learn this as children. Sharing is probably one of the first lessons you learn as a child. And there's actually anthropological evidence that we were more egalitarian in the last 200 to 300,000 years. We evolved in a state of egalitarian kind of, I suppose, ideology or philosophy that people were equal. And they talk about how when they went for a hunt, they'd, kill a big woolly mammoth or deer or whatever, and they'd share it. And everybody would get the same. There wasn't a hierarchy. People would get the same. All the children, adults, men, women would get the same. And this kind of created an environment of equality and people deserve the same. And they actually talk about accounts where people who took more than their fair share were often killed because this is a detriment to the survival of the group. And we need to make sure that everybody's being fed, everybody gets the fair share. And since the advent of agriculture 12,000 years ago, when we started to become individualistic and we just looked after ourselves, that changed. And we just looked after ourselves. We become more individualistic. Like, as long as I'm okay, that's all that matters. And that philosophy has led to so much division, individualism, discontent, unhappiness, because for hundreds of thousands of years, we were cooperative. We were not necessarily competitive. There is an element of competitiveness in us. We are animals. But compared to apes, gorillas, often they are highly hierarchical. There'd be the leader and the people at the top, and there's social structures that are complicated. But historically, there's compelling evidence that says humans were more egalitarian. We were not hierarchical, and that's only recently come in modern history, and it's not inevitable. That's the thing. None of these things are inevitable, that either we're egalitarian or hierarchical. We create these structures. We're not like gorillas. They don't have a choice. They have instincts. They may have some choices, you know, they do evolve certain things, intelligences, like being able to get put a stick in a ant hole to get termites. Intelligence. They've made conscious choices there. But we are so much more sophisticated, and we can build the society we want. And we're told to believe that actually a lot of narratives in humans are inherently selfish. They're inherently competitive. We look after ourselves. Just not true. So hit the like button and read The Inner Level, because you'll learn a lot and it will challenge your notions of what causes so much of social ills. It is economic inequality. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and I'll see you next time.